Flip open your tablets, smartphones, or your Bibles to 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. You'll remember, you're going to race through the New Testament toward the right. When you come across the letter to the Hebrew Christians called Hebrews, you're getting warm. Then you come to James, warmer, and then you'll find 1 Peter. We have been talking with Simon Peter about what is needed to build happy marriages that will stand the test of time. We saw 2 weeks ago that to reach the highest halls of human happiness, we need growing partners. Last week we saw we need gentle partners. Simon Peter has one more suggestion for us, one more practical direction to help us build happy relationships, happy marriages. And if you haven't noticed already, the principles, the relational principles we've been talking about, not only work in marriage between husbands and wives, they work between parents and children, best friends, wherever you have a relationship, these principles will apply. But now, before we dive into Peter's third suggestion for our marriages, I've got to do a quickie little biblical disclaimer. All of my commentaries agree that in verse 8, Simon Peter changes the sights of his gospel gun from marriage partners to the church as a whole. And he basically says that the church should be characterized by an atmosphere of warm, sacrificial giving. Warm, sacrificial giving. But now, what is the church? A lot of ways to define the church. One way you can define the church is a group of people who have gathered together to get strength for the living of their days from the study of God's Word and from worshiping God. That's not a bad definition of the church. What other group might meet that description? How about the family? Families ought to be characterized by a warm, sacrificial spirit of giving. And let me just tell you something. If we can't do it in the family, there ain't no way we're going to be able to do it in the church. If you can't do it at home, it's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen here. Warm, sacrificial spirit of giving. Winston Churchill once wisely observed, you make a living by what you get. You make a life by what you give. And that brilliant theologian and sometime expert on happy families, Katy Perry, once said, love yourself, then give love away. That's true. That's true. Happy marriages require growing partners, gentle partners, and giving partners. And giving partners, first of all, give connection. They give connection. A very seriously minded 7-year-old went to a wedding, probably his first wedding, and for some reason found himself sitting all by himself. Now, you don't need me to tell you that little boys don't like to sit still very long, and they are very easily distracted. But this young man was tuned into the ceremony like a puppy is tuned into his master as his master's eating at the table, hoping for a bite from his master's plate. This guy was zeroed in, and an adult sitting not far away happened to observe his rather respectful and focused behavior. So at the reception, he went up to the young man, struck up a conversation, and said, so, what kind of marriage do you want to have when you grow up? 7-year-old said, oh, I'm never getting married. I've lived with married people far too long already. Haven't you noticed that with so many couples, all of the fun happens before you say I do? And the courtship is over, the ceremony is completed, and before long, all of that excitement and fun of the courtship kind of dries up like morning dew on a desert rock, and the couple hunkers down for a long, bloody war in the trenches. And the only peace treaty ever signed is quite often the divorce papers. I think the problem is a lack of connection. one of the problems anyway, lack of connection. You've heard it said, opposites attract. And as a sometime marriage counselor, pre-marriage counselor, performer of weddings, I've observed that quite often polar opposites, like the opposite ends of a magnet, positive and negative, are drawn strongly together. And then they get married, and the very differences that drew them together begin to drive them apart. What's the solution? Well, quite often the solution couples choose is to give each other space. And in the worst examples of that, they end up living separate lives. That's not healthy. That's dangerous. I think the solution is not to give each other space, but to give each other connection. And in verse 8, Simon Peter gives us some road signs that point to how to give connection. And this is especially apropos if you're polar opposites. To sum up, all of you be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit. Let's unpack those words. I mean, he just throws words at us, like picking up the game of Scrabble and tossing all the letters at us. Let's take them apart. Harmonious means to think the same thing. It's a Greek word, it's a compound word, and it means to think the same thing. But now it does not mean that you will always have the same opinion, always have the same desires, and always come to the same conclusion. In fact, if you always have the same opinion, one of you is unnecessary. Okay? All right? And what it means is that the hubby is going to work really hard at trying to understand where the wifey's coming from, and wifey is going to work really hard at understanding where the hubby comes from. This is really a very important skill if you have polar opposites in that marriage. My goal is to understand what Arlene is thinking and not to change her mind. Do you see the difference? In Romans 14, verse 1, Paul wrote, "Now except the one who is weak in the faith." Now let's be honest. In the church and in the home, the one who disagrees with me is the one who's weak. Okay? Isn't that what we usually think? All right? Except the one who's weak in faith, but not for the purpose of passing judgment on his opinion. You shouldn't feel that way. Paul said, don't do that. Think the same thing. Sympathetic means to feel the same thing. It's another compound word. It means to feel the same thing. Romans 12:15 says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep." And what Peter and Paul are both talking about is empathy. Another word that means to feel the same thing. Now, some people are good at empathy. Some people are not. And I don't want to generalize, but a lot of guys have a hard time with empathy, have a hard time with feelings. Not just communicating them, but even, being in tune with their own feelings. It can be a challenge. But if you are not good at empathy, I want to give you two things that you can do. Two things you can do. You may not feel what the spouse is feeling, but there are two things you can do. Number one, respect and affirm the other person's feelings. Respect those feelings, affirm those feelings. Now, you may, guys or gals, there are some women who are not in touch with their feelings either. Everybody's different. We are all wired differently, and we experience the things of life differently. And if you're in a relationship, friendship, whatever, with a polar opposite, you can just pretty well take it to the bank that you're going to feel differently about things. Respect and affirm those feelings. You may not get it. You may not feel it. The comment is, I'm just not feeling it. Okay, you may not be feeling it, but you can say, you know what? I can see you're upset. And I don't blame you. You got a right to feel that way. In fact, let me tell you a secret. God created you and me with a different kind of emotional makeup. Our emotions are neither good nor bad. They are. It's what we do with them that's good or bad. So don't ever say to somebody, you shouldn't feel that way. Because basically what we're saying is, you shouldn't be the you God made you to be. Okay? Respect and affirm the feeling. Second thing we can do if we have trouble with empathy is ask your spouse or your best friend or whomever, your kids, whatever, to explain what happened, how he or she feels, and then listen. Listen. One of the most loving things that we can do is listen to someone, to hear. Remember, we distinguish between listening and hearing. You can listen in one ear and it runs out the other. But really hear what is meant. Next word, brotherly. This one is surprising to me, especially applied to marriage. The word brotherly is the Greek word for friendship love, philos. Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. This is the Greek word for friendship love. Now, applying that to marriage would have been revolutionary in Peter's day. Let me tell you something about marriage in those days. Most husbands and wives were not friends. In that culture, the wife's job was to bear children, keep the house, and make husband look good. That was it. Husbands went outside of the home for friendship love, either with their guy friends or with other women. And that was culturally acceptable. Don't do that today, guys. In fact, I found out about somebody that was doing that, and he basically fell in love with a married woman. That's a very dangerous thing to do. Okay? Now, Arlene and I were very fortunate in this regard because we were best friends before we even started dating. Well, we started dating, and then we got engaged. I went off to seminary, and it fell to Arlene to tell the youth group that we had led together, I as youth director, her as a Sunday school teacher, that we were engaged. One of the young men said, "But Miss Arlene, you can't marry Ray. He's your best friend." Actually, that's not a bad way to do it. You ever heard a spouse say, I love him, but I don't really like him? I love her, but I don't really like her. That's really not uncommon, especially in homes where the husband and wife are polar opposites. How do we build friendship love? In his excellent book, His Needs, Her Needs, Divorce Proofing Your Marriage, and men, if you haven't read it, ladies, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. He said that couples need to find something they enjoy doing together and pour their energy into it. Find something they really enjoy doing, and then do it together. Because friendship love grows out of shared experiences, doing the same things that you like. One of Arlene's of my nieces is a delightful woman who married a really great guy, but they're very opposite in personality types. She's an outgoing, effervescent extrovert. He's a very quiet, reserved, thoughtful introvert. They're very different. But they really enjoy camping in their RV, and they really enjoy riding horses together. So they do that together. Some couples teach Sunday school together. Others do crafts or gardening or antiquing together. Find something that you both enjoy and do it together. Another word, kind-hearted. It means have a desire to help. A kind-hearted spouse looks for ways to make the other spouse's journey easier. I don't know, polishing his shoes, cleaning her car, fixing his lunch, folding her laundry, doing the dishes, cooking the supper, the lunch, or whatever. And then finally, a humble spirit. Bottom line, I'm not too good to do it. I'm not too good to do it. I'm not too good to watch that show. I'm not too good to engage in that hobby. I'm not too good to listen without trying to fix the problem. I'm not too good to let you think or feel what you think or feel, even though it's dramatically different from what I do. I'm not too good to do it. Giving partners give connection. They give it. It's a choice. It's a discipline. They also give conciliation. And I know some of you are going, what? How do you spell that? Conciliation? It's not a word we use very much. Not the only place you see it, really, is in the compound word reconciliate, which means to conciliate again. Conciliate, or to conciliate, means to become agreeable, to get along. Conciliation is about agreeing to disagree agreeably. Willing to disagree agreeably. You know, conflict in marriage or any kind of friendship or relationship is actually very healthy. In fact, if there is not conflict occasionally in a marriage relationship, that may be an indication that something's not quite right with the relationship. It may be an indication that one party or the other has given up trying to do what he wants, trying to go where she wants, trying to watch what he wants, because the other person always has to win. The other person always has to have his or her way. Now, I'm just going to tell you, if you never have conflict for that reason, that's a recipe for disaster. Because the person who always loses will get tired of losing. One of my favorite authors about marriage and family is Gary Small. He's gone home to be with Jesus. He's 33 again. He used to say, conflict is a doorway to intimacy. I love that. We tend to avoid conflict. We tend to run from it. But conflict is a doorway to intimacy, but it has to be handled in a healthy manner. You have to disagree agreeably. I read about a young couple who were just starting out, having trouble with money. Most of us who just started out had problems making ends meet. One day, they had a big disagreement over finances. The wife had come home with a beautiful brand new dress that she had charged on a credit card. When hubby found the credit card receipt, he got kind of upset because he did not have the money to reimburse the charge so that at the end of the month they could pay off their credit card bill. And he said, how could you buy a dress for $250 when we're barely making ends meet? And she said, well, you know, I found myself outside of the store admiring the dress through the window. Well, the next thing I knew, I was in the store trying it on. And she said, it was like Satan was saying, oh, you look fabulous in that dress. You should buy it. You know what I do when I face that kind of temptation, the husband said? I say, get thee behind me, Satan. And she said, well, I did. I said, get thee behind me, Satan. And he said, well, it looks fabulous from back here, too. Up to that point, they had disagreed agreeably. In verses 9 to 12, Peter gave some very practical suggestions for agreeable disagreements. First suggestion, no evil speech. In other words, don't retaliate. We touched on this in a previous message, but he comes back to it. Look at verses 9 and 10. Not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. Oh, if you haven't underlined that, you need to. For you were called for the very purpose that you might inherit a blessing. For the one who desires life, to love, to see good days, must keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Now, it's so easy to disagree disagreeably. Okay? You know, our tempers start flaring. We start using power statements like, you never, or you always, or I never get to, and you never let me. And then we, launch back and forth with each other. I got a phone call the other day from a couple whose premarital counseling I did and wedding I did some years ago. We touched base from time to time. You never believe why they called me. They called me to tell me that they'd had a fight the night before. And they said, Pastor, it works. We used I feel and I need statements. We didn't use power statements like you always or you never. We shared our feelings. And it worked. It worked. If anger tends to color your disagreements, I read a marriage counselor years ago that said, she said, when you have a disagreement, get two chairs, sit in them facing each other, knees to knees. Maybe even hold hands, because she said physical touch diffuses anger. Hard to be angry when you hold hands. Okay. No evil speech. Secondly, no evil intent. In other words, don't win at any cost. Don't win at any cost. Look at 11 and 12. He must turn away from evil and do good. He must seek peace and pursue it. Seek, did you underline that? You're in a disagreement. You seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears attend to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. You know, some people always have to be right. Some people always have to have the final word. They always have to get their way. It's my way or the highway. Let me tell you what, people who always have to win risk losing the relationship. You really risk losing the relationship. Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 is a verse. I've never memorized it, quite honestly, because I know where it is. All right, and I know basically what it says. I should probably memorize this one. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourself. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests. And he doesn't say don't look out for your personal interests. It's up to you to make sure your needs are met. But what he says is, do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. Let me apply this to conflict resolution in any relationship, but obviously we're talking about marriage, with family, friends. Hubby needs to care more about wifey than me. And wifey needs to care more about hubby. Because you see, when hubby cares more about wifey's concerns, and wifey cares more about hubby's concerns, then they're going to work hard for both persons to win. Haven't you heard it said, well, marriage is all about compromise? I would argue that marriage and any other relationship, it's always about compromise. No, it's unhappy marriages that are all about compromise. It's unhappy relationships that are all about compromise. Because everybody loses in compromise. You say, well, wait a minute. But you also win some. Yeah, you do. But given human nature, what do you remember? The wins or the losses? What happens is, those losses start piling up. And as they start piling up, the anger starts piling up. And that leads to unhappy marriages. Years ago, there was a TV show called Aaron's Way, which starred Merlin Olsen, who was a very famous football player and then became a sportscaster. He tried to break into Hollywood, had some success in movies and TV series, finally got his own series. Aaron's Way was about an Amish family that left Amish country to go to the big city, and it explored the culture clashes they experienced. In one episode, and it may be the only episode I ever watched, my wife's parents watched it all the time. I don't think I saw more than 1 or 2 episodes. But in this episode, Aaron and his wife had a great big fight that ended with Aaron storming out of the house. Well, their son, who was big time into baseball, had just come home from ball practice. I don't know if it was Little League or school. And he saw the whole thing, and he was literally terrified to tears. His big sister hugged him and said, "Why are you so worried? Mama and Papa got angry back in Pennsylvania." "Yeah," said her brother, "but back in Pennsylvania, people stayed together when they fought. I have 3 friends who live in a home without either a mama or a papa." this kind of shook the sister's confidence because she had friends in the same kind of single-parent homes. And she said, how does that happen? And the little baseball player said, I guess it happens when mamas and papas keep score. You gotta win at any cost. And the cost is somebody loses. I'm always right. I gotta do what I want to do. We're gonna do it my way or no way at all. I gotta win at all costs. You've heard the proverb. It's an old one, but it's true. You can win the battle and end up losing the war. Now, that's why you gotta put the other partner's needs first. When both people are working for the other person to win, then both people win. And when you always win, there's never a reason to keep score. I love Genesis 1, 2, and 3. I love the creation stories. When God created the world, He stepped back and said, that's good. That's good. And then He made people and He said, oh, that's really good. And you remember, what was the first thing He said, not good? Loneliness. It's not good for people to be alone. So God created the institution of marriage to cure loneliness, to be an antidote for loneliness. But for marriages to work, for marriages to be an antidote to loneliness, because you can still be married and still be lonely, for us to achieve the highest halls of human happiness, we need growing partners, gentle partners, and giving partners. Let's pray. God, thank you for the institution of marriage, for the establishment of relationships and friendships. We are designed to be connected. We bless you for the ties that bind us together as friends, as church family, as husbands and wives, parents and children, grandparents, grandkids, cousins. So many connections. And yet, God, as fallen, frail creatures of dust, we have a bad habit of messing up our relationships. If we could just take your principles and prayerfully apply them as husbands and wives, parents and children, as friends, brothers and sisters in Christ, then the tie that binds tight. We will not be alone. Make it so, Father. In our hearts. Make it so. In Jesus' name. Amen. Grab your songbooks. Turn to number 504. Stand with me. Let's make this our prayer. God, give us Christian homes. Number 5.